So I only recently played The Last of Us Part 1 very recently, and I finished it about 3 days ago as me writing the script. To this day, I've never actually owned my own console. I've always ever shared something with like my siblings or something that my family would have, and we only ever kind of owned Nintendo consoles, and I never had like an Xbox or a PS3 or anything like that growing up. My brother, for a brief period, I believe had a PS3, and I played on it maybe like 2 or 3 times. But for the most part, I've never really had a chance to play on a lot of these like console exclusive games because I just didn't have access to them. But of course, now you can buy a lot of them on like Steam or some kind of other place like like Xbox Game Pass. And I have been having a really fun time finally getting to kind of experience some of these things. For one, I experienced Red Dead Redemption 2 about 2 years ago, and I keep gushing about how much I like it, and I will keep including it in videos, and they keep popping up somewhere, and I mention it like a few times every now and then. It's really satisfying to finally get to like actually experience these games for myself, rather than just watching, another like Let's Play, or how I actually enjoy a lot of this content, which is just watching so many of just like video essays on these things. And so it's really satisfying to finally get to play The Last of Us after, watching just so many video essays, breaking down the game or like talking about the story and just what it meant to them. And I've rewatched those so many times, and it's nice to finally get to play the game. And the same way that I do kind of with everything, I'm taking this information from experiencing this game for the first time and kind of processing it through the information or the way that I understand it, which is DnD. The Last of Us Part 1 and plenty of other Naughty Dog games are touted for having very good like story beats and then just like very complex characters. I think there's like a Neil Druckmann quote regarding The Last of Us where he's saying something, it goes along the lines of like simple story, complex characters. Because to be honest, The Last of Us has a very, very basic story. Like we've all kind of seen those beats before, but it's these very complex characters that make us feel so passionately about these games. I can't necessarily speak on the validity of how that feels with like all the other Naughty Dog games, but I can for sure say that they absolutely stuck the landing with The Last of Us Part 1. I truly just could not get over this like pseudo, father-daughter relationship that was kind of blooming in this game, despite me knowing almost beat for beat how it was going to happen in game. To experience it myself was really something special. And not because I really just like to kind of see how I can incorporate something of that into D&D. I wanted to talk about how we can take these very dynamic characters, complex characters, with their own arcs that kind of intersect with each other, and how we can do that at a D&D table, and how as a DM you can kind of foster that as well. First things first, I really want to talk about the fact that this viewpoint of how I'm going to be talking about making characters is highly based on how I personally like to enjoy TTRPGs. I personally think that TTRPGs are kind of a medium for collaborative storytelling, and I think a lot of people can agree with me on that. And I think that characters exist within these stories, and good characters generally have some kind of character arc, and that these story beats within these arcs are intentional choices by a writer. And in this case, that means the player and DM. When you are making any artistic medium, there are thousands of different intentional choices along the way that make the product what it is. Movies, there are so many different things, like the color grading, just like the color of a scene, the set, set design. When you are doing art, there are different design elements, shape language, all these kinds of things go into play. So generally when I am making a character to play within a D&D game, like at someone else's table the few times that I get to, I am very highly intentional of where I want that character to go. Like I have a character arc in mind. Of course, things can change and some details aren't going to be there. That's where the improv comes in, right? You have like an arc in mind. How you actually get there? Improv. A really simple example that people can get behind, I think, is like the lone wolf character that slowly opens up to the party and, understands found family. You can get there if you have planned for that. The actual details of how, he opens up to the party, that's kind of up in the air. That's up to, dice rolls and improv and what other people say, of course, because it's very complicated. You're dealing with a lot of other people at the same time. But as long as you have that goal in mind for that character, it's like, oh, he's eventually going to open up, you can probably get there as long as, your DM's in it, the other players are in on it. You'll probably get there in a satisfying way and have that kind of satisfying conclusion to that, arc. And it's a very simple arc, but it's still meaningful. So that's kind of my philosophy when I'm thinking about like D&D characters and how this thing functions. It's storytelling, and storytelling requires intentionality. And so you should have characters where you have like goals and you kind of fill in your way with improv. I know that some people, you know, do improv all the way. And that's just not necessarily me. So if you're that kind of player, that's totally fine. You don't have to listen to this advice at all. But if you're the kind of player who like wants to have this like big dramatic thing, you need to plan for it a little bit, I think. Like, how do you put sauce into this goal so that when it gets there, it just feels a lot better for everyone at the table? That's a very fun and interesting challenge for me. I think there's like a fine balance between like a journey and destination when you're making a, you know, like a character arc, especially for a TTRPG character. You can't just have journey, because if, you know, journey is like the improv. That if you just have that, you're kind of aimless and your character doesn't necessarily go anywhere. So you need to focus in a little bit. And you can't just have destinations like goals, right? Because at some point you start reading from a script, right? You want your character to say this exact thing, and you are kind of self-railroading yourself. So you need both. I'm saying all this because if you want a very compelling story arc, especially with, you know, like in comparison to characters like Ellie and Joel, you know, Aang and the gang in Avatar, Sam and Frodo, like Toad and Frog, any of those iconic duos, you have to kind of plan it, because none of those very interesting characters happened on a whim. It happened because a bunch of writers and actors and, you know, artists got together to make this beautiful thing that affected so many people. And the beautiful thing about it being kind of like a collaborative game with your friends is that they will throw you kind of like, you know, hooks that you weren't necessarily ready for, and it kind of changes the arc a little bit for a character, or changes the personality of a character a little bit, but can still aid in making that very compelling dynamic. A very famous story from The Last of Us was that Ellie used to not be as active as a character, but because of Ashley Johnson, she was like, I think I should, you know, she would have done something in this situation. You know, Neil Druckmann and all the writers, they readjusted and rewrote a lot of the scenes in accordance to, you know, that kind of curveball that she threw for them. And I think it made it better. But they still kind of had goals they still wanted to meet with that character. Again, fine balance. And because if you want to have like goals and combine it with someone else's goals, you kind of have to get into something that I keep talking about on this channel, which is open communication. In a game where you are collaborating with your friends and you are constantly, you know, telling these stories that interweave with each other and trying to have fun, constant communication is key. First things first, you should talk things with your DM if you have plans that you want for your character, because realistically, your DM wants you to have an experience that you enjoy. So if you tell them, hey, I kind of want like scenes of this kind of nature, or like I want this kind of reference, they can then plan and make scenes that kind of fit the arc that you have planned for your character. If you're that lone wolf character and your DM doesn't know that you want to get closer to the party, how are they supposed to know to, you know, give you the tools so you can have like a satisfying moment with the other characters in the party and grow closer? Let's say you're a set of characters that are like falling to darkness, but your DM doesn't know that you want to have this whole like temptation thing. They won't throw temptations in front of you if they don't know that you want to slowly turn to the dark side. Your DM can only tailor things specifically to you if they are aware of what you specifically want. You have to tell them. Of course they could guess, but their guesses might not always be right. You know, they're not mind readers, you know? Actually just going in and playing is the easy part. Of course, you're just playing D&D as you normally would. You're just like kind of rolling at a table, but you're back in your head, you're like, I kind of want these choices, or the way I describe these choices, to be leading me towards a satisfying arc. That's super easy to do. But above game, you should just be going with your, you know, whoever you want to work with. If you want to do like a duo character or even your own personal character, you should be talking to your DM and just whoever you need to, so that they're aware that this is the arc that you kind of want to perpetuate and you want to push forward. So if you want to have that satisfying arc, talk to people. So this part is unscripted because I had an experience literally just yesterday night, as I'm recording this. After our D&D game, we always go out to eat. One of my players, his character, name is Merrick. He had a falling out with one of the other characters named Kestra, who is played by my girlfriend. And he was like, oh yeah, I'm trying to repair the relationship, but like in a very subtle way. She's like, oh, I have noticed that, but I haven't like acted on it in game yet. And I had, you know, I talked to them after and I was like, that would be a really good opportunity because we're going into an arc where essentially her character, whose name is Kestra, needs to decide between, like, you know, her found family versus her real family, because one of the villains is her mom. And so I was telling her, it's like, oh, you should kind of put into the game that you like notice that Merrick has been nicer and he has been trying to like mend the relationship in some way. That way you kind of have that drama of like, oh, I was getting ready to abandon my found family, but I'm gonna choose them in the end because, you know, I noticed that they're trying, and that kind of adds to the tension and everything of that. And that was just like something of like, my players are talking about their plans and how they want their arcs to go, and they want to like, you know, they're planning to have like this moment, and it's cool because it's all been building up, and because it's happening because they talked about it. And so in the next session, when we're building up to this boss fight, I'm gonna be throwing in things of where, like, you know, Mary's doing this, or like we're putting in positions so that she can see that Mary's doing this thing. And also kind of throwing the tension of her mom trying to appease her, just so that that ultimate choice feels better. And I think that's cool. Okay, unscripted part over. Okay, point of the story is, if you really want to just like have a cool moment with other players, kind of discuss it on them. Yes, surprises are sometimes fun, but if you really want to have like a cool thing that affects the rest of the table, kind of talk one-on-one with someone else, or talk with the DM so they can kind of set that up for you. I think that's really fun. If you even want to build characters around each other, again, like father-daughter, or like any of these cool kind of dynamics, you know, just study those in the shows and see if you guys can build some characters together. But the point is that you kind of have to like talk and kind of plan things with other people, and be like, oh, how do we want our dynamic to go? And then sometimes like throughout the game, things will change and you're like, oh, maybe this dynamic is not going to work anymore based on the events in the game, and we can kind of shift our focus. It's collaborative, just talk to people. That's pretty much the whole point of it. I think the script has kind of gone off board a little bit. Again, I think this point was supposed to be talking about The Last of Us a lot more, but for me, I just really want people to talk to their DM so that they can kind of make cool moments, because again, cool moments a lot of times in stories, they had to be planned. Someone was writing them. Basically, at a D&D table, you're like a group of, you know, 3 up to like 8 writers, technically, storytellers, telling a story together. So kind of treat it like that sometimes. Sometimes above game, there's like talk of like, where do I want my character to go? Of course, everything in moderation. You don't want to plan so much that you're basically scripting yourselves, but you having a character goal is really important on making sure your character doesn't feel aimless, or like your character doesn't feel like they're improving as much. Because if you don't intend on them improving, they're not going to improve. Your DM can't realistically give you an arc. You have to latch onto it yourself, obviously. Like, you have to choose that. Anyways, if you guys have stuck around this long, please let me know if you've had any experience of like satisfying moments of just like communication with your DM that have led to very cool moments. Please let me know. Or if you've played any like duos with another character where you guys have built your characters together, that kind of thing. I would love to know that. Again, the just comments have been my favorite part of like this whole process. And I love reading these crazy long paragraphs that everyone has been leaving me in a lot of my videos. So thank you. Have a great day.